Hello, this is Angela with Parker's Permaculture. I'm sitting in the backyard of my garden here in Portland, Oregon in Zone 8B. But I'm not going to talk about gardening today. This is Hausfrau Friday. Now, normally these videos come out on Friday, but I already know this is going to be late. I have been filming footage for this video for the last 2 weeks, but it is now late Friday afternoon before I am putting it all together and filming this kind of intro segment. So I spent the morning in a series of Zoom meetings. As many of you know, we are, as a community, trying to fight a diesel freight warehouse from coming into our neighborhood 15 feet from a low-income apartment complex and across the street from our Title I high school. So that is consuming a lot of my time, and so this video is going to be delayed. But I wanted to take a few minutes before I head off to that meeting and share the project that I've been working on for the last few weeks. Humans are creative beings, and we see that in our high need to express ourselves in all kinds of areas, be it garden design or be it the clothes that we wear. So today I want to share a project that I've been working on. Stand up and show you. This is the Elizabeth Zimmermann butterfly vest. For those of you who are big knitters and maybe learned to knit in the 90s like I did, or even earlier, Elizabeth Zimmermann was an icon of knitting. And this is a pattern I've wanted to do for years and years and have just never gotten around to it. It's a really deceptively simple garment. One of the things I love about Elizabeth Zimmermann as a pioneer of fashion and knitting is that she had a lot of garter stitch. She loved garter stitch very, very much. And these very cleverly designed garments where she was really thinking about the 3D geometry. And that has an appeal for me because I feel like the way that my brain works in designing the garden as a 3D space, I love the way that that ties into the way my brain works when we're thinking about 3D garments and how they bend and fold to our human form, much like our garden conforms to the landscape. And so I've always found her designs really appealing. She has mad love for garter stitch. She has mad love for garments that bend and fold and you knit them flat and you're like, is this like knitted origami? And it kind of is. So this pattern was kind of out of print and it has been published. I will put the link down below to where you can purchase the pattern. I will also put a link down below to the Ravelry group where folks talk about this because I felt it was really helpful. The pattern looks really easy. I don't think it's very well written. I've been knitting for 25 years and I found the pattern confusing. It is an updated pattern. A quick note here about this pattern. It has been refurbished and put out by Schoolhouse Press. When I say it's confusing, I mean it is confusing. While the design of the garment itself is quite elegant and well thought out, I found the pattern hard to read, especially if you have to adjust the sizing. I purchased the pattern digitally online and then printed it off at home. You can see that I do most of my knitting very early in the morning when it's still dark out. I have a cup of coffee, I edit video and I knit, or perhaps I listen to a podcast and I knit. Here you can see that I am working one half of the vest. You start with the neck as a little tab, and then you cast on for the body of the front of one side of the vest. I knitted a gauge swatch first, and I am knitting the pattern size for a 36-inch bust, but I found that it is very, very wide. You can see here I'm going to have to fold over and make a shawl collar. For this project, I had endeavored to not buy any new yarn, but it didn't quite work out that way. Here I'm using some beautiful wool that my friend Adrian gave me, and also this white wool that I spun myself quite a long time ago from wool that a friend gave me from her sheep. I'm also using some leftover yarn here, although I ended up not having quite enough and I had to go purchase more from my local yarn shop. The curve of the vest is shaped with a series of short rows, and here I tried to do stripes as I began running out of the first ball of the gray yarn. And I realized partway through that the way the pattern is designed, those stripes were only going to work on one side, so I ended up opting for a block of blue on the back, and I really like the contrast of stripes on one half of the back of the garment and color blocking on the other. The next day it was cold and rainy, and I followed doctor's orders and took some time to rest. You can see I finished the first half of the vest. Here's the provisional cast on at the neck. There's the shoulder, and there is the curve of the front and wrapping around to the back. Now again, despite knitting to gauge, it is far too wide. I don't want it to hang down over my shoulder, so I'm doing a shawl collar fold over. Now I have to do the other half of the vest. So here is the provisional cast on. The pattern calls for knitting 2 separate pieces, but on Ravelry, I found folks saying that if you pull out the provisional cast onto that live edge, the other half of the neck, you can work it as one piece and you won't have to do Kitchener stitch later. A really quick reminder, if you want the front halves to match, you want to split your yarn in half. So I used 1 ball for the left side and 1 ball of this Dovestone Natural Aran that my friend Adrienne gave me for the other half. Okay, back to the provisional cast on. I'm going to pull it out. I will link below, by the way, to tutorials on how to do a provisional cast on. So I'm just pulling out this bit of scrap yarn, and then I'm going to have 10 live stitches I will pick up and put on my needle to knit the other half of the collar. A little tip that was included in the pattern is that for the selvage edge on the outside, if you begin by slipping the first stitch with yarn in front, you get a really nice braided edge. The pattern has lots of gaps in it, so if you are a new knitter, make sure that you take lots of notes. You can see here, I put notes everywhere on my pattern because I wasn't knitting the size that was included. I was sizing up to the 36-inch bust size. And I found it very confusing to follow the pattern as it had the set number of repeats and stitches only for one size. And you have to remember to do the math and make notes and add in if you are changing the sizing. Here I'm taking the live edge and I am adding my new ball of yarn. With the 10 stitches here, I am doing the other half of the neckline, and then I'm going to increase for the shoulder. I have finished the neckline and now I am increasing for the shoulder. I am doing that with the backward loop method as indicated by the pattern. I have a tutorial on how to do this down below as well as up here in the corner. It's amazing how quickly the weather can change. The next day was sunny and beautiful, and I took my knitting with me to the park where my kids were playing with other unschoolers, and I got a chance to chat with parents. One of my favorite ways to be out in nature is with my knitting, either going on a hike and knitting as I walk, or sitting and enjoying the gorgeous outdoors while I work on knitting projects. I just find that knitting outside is as enjoyable, if not more so, than knitting by the fireside on a cold, rainy day. We ended up having a mini heat wave, so I spent quite a bit of time in the shade, listening to the birds in my garden and knitting. Now here I want to show you how the short rows work. Short rows are exactly what they say. You don't knit all the way across. You knit a short length turn, knit back, a shorter length turn, knit back, even shorter length turn, knit back. In doing so, one side of the garment grows and the other doesn't, and that's how you get a curve to create the armhole. Don't forget, I'm starting the first stitch of each row, slipping with the yarn in front, then moving the yarn to the back and knitting across until I get to the short row turn. You can see here that I knit by throwing my stitches rather than picking them. Now, I've been told by multiple friends that I would knit much faster if I were to start picking instead of throwing, which is true. It's a much smaller motion, but I've been knitting since I was 19, and for me, when I try picking, I go much slower, and it doesn't feel natural and intuitive. I have worked to the point in my pattern where I need to turn and knit back. Keep in mind, if you are adjusting the size, the number of stitches in the pattern will not be correct, and you will need to calculate how far to knit down before you turn back. I had to knit 36 stitches, then I bring my yarn to the front. I slip the 37th stitch, wrap my yarn around to the back, and then I just turn my work around. I don't knit those last few stitches, and then I knit back the other way. First, I'll have to re-slip that stitch again, move my yarn back to the back, and then knit back to the beginning. I'll be sure to link down below to some comprehensive tutorials on short rows if you need some more assistance with that. I really love having this pergola out our back door. It gives me a protected spot to sit and work on projects such as this butterfly vest. And I can watch my bees, my ducks, my chickens, look at the garden in bloom. But even more than that, I find as I sit quietly and observe that the wildlife in my garden wants to interact with me more. If I'm quiet and unobtrusive, I notice things like carpenter bees trying to make a home. I notice mason bees using the holes in my patio furniture for their nests. And the quieter I am, the more the birds come up to me, singing, interacting, going about their busy little lives, gathering food for their families and material for their nests. Lots of wrens and sparrows in my garden right now of several different species. Here you can see we cook a lot outdoors on hot days, so I'm getting some knitting in while dinner is cooking for the family. Well, it's 6:20 in the morning, and this is a time of day that I'm usually up and working on editing video and knitting and having my coffee. I am pre-coffee right now, so. However, I have noticed as I was sitting down to edit and work on the rest of this sweater, I was working on knitting up the back part. I've made a big mistake. Now, I will say this is my own fault because I was starting the back. I joined the two pieces, the front and side pieces, while watching Succession, and I wasn't paying attention. So I don't know if you can see the larger diameter part here is on the out. Yeah, that should be on the in. So these pieces need to be flipped like this. So I'm gonna have to rip all of this out and then join so that this piece is on this side basically. So pay attention when you are joining two pieces together that you don't flip them the wrong way around, because then the garment doesn't work. This is a really cleverly designed garment with a, that showcases Elizabeth Zimmermann's real talent for taking simple shapes, simple garter knitting, and creating really kind of dynamic, comfortable pieces. But she works with that 3D geometry. And so you need to pay attention to what you're doing. It's a deceptively simple pattern. So now I'm gonna rip this all up. Okay, so now that these two pieces are torn apart, I need to put them together the right way around. And that means not this way, but this way. And I want to make sure that I don't twist the collar while I do it. So I'm going to lay it out, make sure I have this going this way. This is the armpit. Goes this way. And this side, this armpit goes this way to the out. And here's my collar, looking good. And now I can join them like this. All right, I have knit up the back, which was super easy after joining the two pieces correctly. All I have to do is knit back and forth with stripes. I used up all of the gray wool on the front, you can see here. Done, there's the shoulder, there's the neckline. There is the other shoulder. That's the front half, and then it folds over down here and wraps up the back. So really nice construction, really easy and simple once you understand how it goes together. Now you can see the back here, it's split in the back. Later you can sew up that seam as much as you want and have the split go as high up the back as you would like. Once again, the pattern is a little unclear here. We need to pick up stitches along the shoulder and neckline for the front in order to do a 3-needle bind off, but the number of stitches will change depending on what size garment you chose to create. Now I have to cast off using a 3-needle bind off. This may or may not be frustrating to you to have to juggle 3 needles. I find it a nice, easy way to get a really good, seamless shoulder while binding off. You want to have the right sides facing each other and the wrong side of the work facing toward you when you do this bind off if you want it to be really flat and smooth. For a 3-needle bind off, I am going to take 1 stitch from the front needle, 1 stitch from the back needle, knit them together, and then bind off. Because I had all this extra width and needed to do a folded over collar, I actually tacked it down in several places so that it would lay nicely. I wanted to make this because, I was recovering from surgery and I had doctor's orders to take it easy because I was having some additional problems with my heart because I was really pushing myself too hard. And that physiological stress on top of all of the life stress I was dealing with was not good for me. I find knitting to be extremely therapeutic and restful. And so I decided I was going to purchase this pattern and knit it. I had this beautiful yarn that a friend of mine gave me. And then I had some white homespun that I had spun up 15 years ago and never found a use for. And they were exactly the same weight and they knitted up really similar in a test swatch. And then I had this blue yarn here left over from knitting a hat for a friend. And I thought this is a great opportunity for me to kind of create a garment that is restful, that makes me sit down and take it easy, and that uses up resources, a free resource, a gifted resource of yarn that was spun from mystery sheep that my friend gave me the fiber for, and that I spun myself at an earlier phase in my life and has been hanging around for many years. And then leftover yarn from another project. Added to that, I had to go back to the yarn store and buy more. I'll show you in a second. Let's spin this way, actually. I had to buy more yarn for this color blocking section back here because I ran out. So then that allowed me to support a local yarn store on top of that. So not only did I create a garment where I combined a lot of the values that I hold dear, it was a way that I allowed my body to rest and heal a little bit more. So I've been working on this for the past few weeks. So overall, I'm super pleased with how this turned out, you guys. I felt like it had some hiccups to it, some caused by me, but also the pattern, I think, if I had followed the pattern true to 36-inch bust, this collar is not supposed to sit like this, and I would have had it down my shoulders like this. So if I were to knit it again in the future, I would actually prefer this line right here. This collar, I don't mind being nice and big, but I would prefer this silhouette to look more like that, right? Don't you think that looks better? So I don't know if I'm gonna be tempted to come back and sew that down, but I'm gonna make some notes and adjustments that it knit up very large for me. And, and there were some other little hiccups along the way where I felt like the pattern wasn't super clear. I hope that I have helped you in this video. For me, I think that knitting is such an important part of sustainable living. Any handwork that you do is so important in the pursuit of sustainable living. It's good for our mental health. We need that opportunity for creative expression. And also there's a lot to be said for sustainable fashion, right? For me, this garment embodies all of those things. It embodies self-care, it embodies sustainable fashion, it embodies kind of a slower pace of life that I earnestly want to embrace. So for me, making this vest was a really good and meaningful journey, and I'm really glad that I did it. If you have questions, if you want to make the Elizabeth Zimmermann butterfly vest or any of her other patterns, I have knit a lot of her stuff over the years, feel free and drop those questions down below. I'm happy to help guide you if you get stuck on this pattern like I did. I'm grateful for the Ravelry Facebook group, going back to posts from 13 years ago and seeing how folks were troubleshooting those issues. Thank you for watching today. If you have a project that you feel is really meaningful, a type of handwork that helps sustain you and helps bolster you, I would love to hear about it below. Don't forget to check out the ways in the description that you can support the work of this channel, and I will be back very soon. Thanks. You can see here that I added this clasp that was on a sweater of my mother's, and I'm gonna talk about that in an upcoming video, maybe a bonus video. I'm trying to decide if I don't want to add a series of 3. It makes it look less butterfly-y, but I'm thinking about whether I want to add 3 hooks here or not. So let me know what you think about that.